Hi there. It's February the 13th, and we're continuing with our journey through the good news of Matthew. And we are in chapter 27, and we're reading from verses 32 through to the end of the chapter, verse 66. This is the crux, literally the cross, of Matthew's gospel. This is where the unfolding story, the terrible story, recount of Jesus' crucifixion happens. We left Jesus where he was given over for crucifixion by the soldiers who have abused him. He's taken out to the place of the skull, the Golgotha, from the Hebrew word Gulgolet, which means a skull, and he's taken out there and he is prepared for crucifixion. They offer him vinegar as a kind of anesthetic, so probably vinegar mixed with drugs to try and dull the pain, but Jesus refuses it. Jesus will experience all of the worst that evil has to throw at him here, and he will do it consciously. So they crucify him here, and they put above his head that amazing title, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. Which he is, of course. He is the great one. He is the Lord's anointed, but he has been put on this Roman cross. He's lifted up and he's crucified between two thieves, and in this version, in Matthew's version, they rail against him and they abuse him. In fact, he receives so much abuse. The religious leaders are standing there to witness his demise, and they say, come on then, save yourself, you who would destroy the temple and build it again in 3 days, come down off the cross. And then of course they say those amazing words, he saved others, he cannot save himself. There's something interesting in here because they're acknowledging that Jesus had the power to save, to rescue, to heal, but here he is pinned to the cross, and they're saying, come on, save yourself, come down from the cross. There is continued abuse going on. They cast lots. The soldiers cast lots for his clothes, which Matthew points out is prophesied in the Hebrew scriptures about what would happen. And so again, Jesus completely unable to do anything about it himself, but he is fulfilling scripture, and the Romans are fulfilling scripture by dicing for his clothes, probably because it was a seamless garment that they didn't want to tear up, and so they're casting lots. A horrible situation to see your clothing being played for as prizes in a wager. And then then there is darkness comes over the land, and things get very, very dim in that sense. They get very oppressive at this point. And Jesus cries out, Eli, Eli, lama shvachtani. He cries out in Aramaic, and that's quoting Psalm 22, the first verse of Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? He experiences that forsakenness that humanity has gone through. He experiences what it's like to feel the loneliness and the separation of death coming upon him. Although as God, he is not separated from God. Jesus dies on the cross fully God. And then at the moment, or then they say, oh, he's crying on Elijah. They think he's calling for Elijah, and so they try and help him. They think maybe Elijah is coming. There's a sudden change of heart here, a panic almost on them. But then Jesus cries out with a loud voice, and he surrenders his spirit. Now what happens next is absolutely amazing. There's an earthquake, and in that moment of that earthquake, it says the temple curtain, the great veil that separated the holy place from the Holy of Holies, is torn in two from top to bottom. It's not a human effort, which would be from bottom to top. It's from top to bottom. And it's as though God is saying, I'm coming out of this place. I'm no longer separated. The blood of my Son has united me with the people. Not only that, but something that only Matthew records happens, which is really amazing, is that the bodies of the saints, the Kedoshim, he calls, they may be called in Hebrew, they are raised from the dust. They're raised from the ashes, and they are bodies. This is really interesting. Matthew says it's the bodies that are raised. It's not their spirits. They're not ghosts. But it says the bodies of the saints go around the city, and they kind of take a last look around before joining Jesus in the presence of God. It's an amazing statement that Matthew makes here. The women are involved in this. It's interesting that the men have deserted Jesus, but the women, the Marys, the mother of the sons of Zebedee, the one who was appealing for power for her sons, they are still around. They are still connected, and it's them who stays close to this whole scene. And then Joseph of Arimathea comes and he asks for the body of Jesus so that he can bury it. And he puts it in a tomb, but the authorities are concerned. They see that Jesus has promised. It's interesting that they recognize that Jesus said he would rise again. And so they want Pilate to put a seal on the tomb, because they say if this deceiver if his body is stolen and they claim he's risen from the dead, the latter situation will be worse than the former. And so the reading ends with the seal or the guard, the custodia, being put on the tomb, so that there can be no messing about here. There can be no stealing of the body, and Jesus is sealed in Joseph of Arimathea's tomb. This story is so familiar to us in so many ways, but constantly has the power to come back to us and shock and move and leave us in total awe at what God has done. Because of his love for us, because of his reaching out to us, he was prepared to experience even dereliction, to experience even the sense of being abandoned, so that he could understand, so he could walk with us. We know that he has faced everything we face, death, even the grave. The fact that he lies in a grave as we will lie in a grave is the culmination of the proof of his love and his commitment to us. And we're going to see that whole thing turned around in the next phase, the last phase of Matthew's story. Have a very good February the 13th.